This episode of Job Shadowing HE is kindly sponsored by the Academic Registrars Council. The Academic Registrars Council, known as ARC, is a key professional body for senior administrative and managerial staff in UK higher education institutions. It plays a vital role in shaping and supporting the work of academic registrars who are responsible for a wide range of functions, including student administration, academic policies, examinations, and quality assurance. ARC provides a platform for sharing best practices, influencing policy, and offering professional development opportunities. By facilitating collaboration and communication, the ARC ensures that universities across the UK maintain high standards in student services and academic management. ARC also run professional development sessions helping to prepare the next generation of academic registrars. Search for aspiring academic registrars to find out more information on the next ARC session. I'm Susanna Marsden, and welcome to Job Shadowing HE, the podcast that delves into the roles of people working in higher education. Each episode hears from guests about what's involved in their role, the career path that led to it, and tips on how to get in and get on in these jobs. My guests in this episode are Claire Carter and Akhil Yerneni, who are both partners at the executive search firm Anderson Quigley. In this episode, Claire and Akhil demystify the role of an executive search firm in relation to both permanent and interim roles. They offer advice on when and how to approach firms to maximise engagement. They delve into support they offer to both clients and candidates, and they also discuss their own career paths and the skills and traits needed to get into the HE recruitment profession. Akhil, Claire, welcome to the podcast and thanks for being my guests on this episode. Let's start with a bit about executive search firms. You're both partners of the firm Anderson Quigley. Akhil, can you share an overview of what an executive search firm is and also tell us a bit more about the specific focus of Anderson Quigley?
Hi, Susanna. Yes, of course I can. And thank you for having us on the podcast. Executive search firms typically specialise in finding and placing top-level talent within leadership and executive positions. My industry can use quite mystifying terms like headhunting, management consulting, or, talent advisory or client solutions. I think all in a bid to sort of avoid using the R word, which is recruitment. We are, at our core, recruiters, albeit for leadership and exec level roles. And I just think that's an honest statement of our profession. Coming on to the focus of Anderson Quigley, or AQ, we focus specifically on sectors that have a social purpose. So education, healthcare, charities, in the future, government and wider public sector. And our role is to deeply understand the needs of our clients and help them find the right leaders who can drive the institutions forward. And in so doing, ultimately have a net positive effect on society. So I'll tell you a little bit about what AQ's services are split into. So the following broad areas, so interim management, consultancy, which is different to interim management, executive search for permanent staff, non-exec and board recruitment, and finally a number of sort of ancillary services like assessment and profiling, workshops, webinars, thought leadership, and, of course, CV building and interview prep.
We'll go into a bit more depth about the role of the executive search firm in a moment. But first of all, this podcast always covers a bit about the career paths of its guests. And while you both support other people with their career paths, I'm interested to know a bit more about each of your backgrounds. What took you into the executive search profession, including working with HE? Claire, do you want to start off?
My journey into interim management was fairly straightforward, actually. I fell into recruitment after I graduated in the early 2000s and have been mastering the art ever since. It's not something that I aspired to be when I was younger, recruitment, but it's turned out to be a pretty good career so far, which I really love. So I learned my trade in a contingent recruitment business, working across all areas of public sector. I always had a passion for change and transformation and talking to people who worked to make organisations run more effectively and ultimately save money for their clients. And over time, I realised that helping organisations find the right leaders who could make a significant impact in a short period of time was where I would really thrive. And higher education in particular intrigued me because I feel it's got unique challenges and the profound impact that leadership has on the institutions themselves, the students that attend university, and us as society as a whole is really interesting to me. I also focus a lot of my time on trying to understand and keep up to date with all the challenges that the HE sector faces. So I speak to VCs and other members of university leadership teams all the time. I spend quite a lot of time hearing about the issues that they face and what they're doing about them. And then what I try to do is translate those challenges into a skills need, if you will, or a people solution, and work with my clients and my candidates to create different value propositions that meet these challenges. I moved to AQ now coming up to about 3 years ago. I was really attracted by their foothold in the higher education space. So the opportunity to work with Akhil and John was really attractive for me. And I'm really glad I did. It's a great place to work.
And Akhil, what's your career background so far and your motivation to work in this profession?
A lot of it echoes Claire's thoughts. I also fell into recruitment, but in many ways, I couldn't really imagine myself in a career that doesn't share the same fundamental principles. Matchmaking, talking to people, identifying problems and solutions, and really getting to learn a little about an awful lot. I think that's the main thing that keeps me interested. So fresh out of university, I went into law with a law degree. I had slightly sort of doe-eyed ideals of becoming a sort of advocacy lawyer in court of protection and mental health. And I had some concerns, I think, about the business model of using legal aid pots. And I thought ultimately, a career in something more openly commercial might make for a more transparent living. The fact that we've stayed in social purpose recruitment rather than financial services or private equity recruitment, I hope proves that we have hearts. I do have a great fondness for the HE sector. Everything it symbolises, progressiveness, innovation, knowledge sharing, social mobility and socioeconomic empowerment. And I think the general collectivist mindset rather than individualism. I'm romanticizing it a bit, and I'm sure there are idiosyncrasies about the HE sector that has made everyone on this podcast want to rock in a corner. But I genuinely think there's no other sector I would want to recruit to than education. And as Claire mentioned, AQ is a young search firm, but we have collectively generations of experience and networks within our sectors. And all of that played a part in me moving to AQ and building a career in HE recruitment.
Akhil talked at the start of our conversation about the role of an executive search firm. And in summary, and you've just mentioned the word match there, matching the right candidate to the institution or the client's brief, depending on what that client needs at a particular time. And your careers to date show the huge success you've had in achieving those matches. But I'm quite fascinated to know what you draw upon to get that right and to secure those matches. Claire, can you give some insight about how all this works and what you do practically in your roles?
So essentially, as Akhil said, we are matchmakers and problem solvers. But there is a significant amount of work that we do behind the scenes to ensure that these matches or placements, if you like, are not just successful, but also strategic and help create sustainable organisations that are really fit for the future. So when we're working with clients, what's really important to us is to really understand their needs. And it sounds like a simple thing, but it's actually not. It involves lots of detailed conversations, lots of meetings to really get to the heart of an organisation's culture, what their strategic objectives are, and what specific challenges they're facing at that time. And for many institutions, this means that they have a long-standing relationship with us, and all of us will have been on a journey with them. So we'll know what's coming down the track, we'll help anticipate future needs, we'll help with succession planning, so that basically we put ourselves in a position where we're able to match the right people at the right time. So in order for us to deliver that for our clients, we need to be really up to date with where our candidate community is. And that's a really big ongoing task that Akhil and I have. And I think we probably spend about 50% of our time keeping up to date with our candidates, nurturing our talent pools and making sure that we know at the drop of a hat where everybody is. I think we must have some weird thing in our brain which enables us to recall anything, a bit like a CRM, but yeah. And the other 50% of our time is dedicated to our clients, both from a new business point of view and from a delivery point of view. So it's a combination of thorough assessment, a lot of strategic thinking, and a real genuine passion for connecting the right people with the right opportunities. And that's what really drives our success. With what we do on the candidate side is again, probably very similar with clients. It's all about getting to understand people, what motivates them, where their strengths are and where are they going to thrive. And you can only do that by getting to know people.
And Akhil, in doing that matching role that you and Claire do, whether it's for interims or a permanent role, is it a help or a hindrance that neither of you have ever worked in a university?
I love that question, Susanna. I think it's a definite help. So I don't say this to sort of blow my own horn, but more so to frame what I'm about to say. So over the last half a decade, I've appointed about 50 people a year, which amounts to about 250 appointments. And that's, let's say, across 20 different functional areas, in academic and professional services. And that will have been nationwide for about 90 higher education institutions. So that spans Russell Group, post-92s, research intensives, the specialist and alternative providers, and also private providers, both degree awarding and non-degree awarding entities. So there's really no part of the HE sector or geographic part of the UK I haven't had, the opportunity to help someone solve a challenge within. And when you can see all of those functional areas and see how they connect and work together and what problems they share, sometimes systems, sometimes processes, quite often people or resourcing related issues, I think it really helps build a holistic picture of the HE market as a whole. And I think there aren't many professions within HE that offer that bird's eye view. I don't think there's any other profession really that has seen as many person specs or job descriptions as Claire or I have, for example. And we have a ever evolving understanding of, market rates or what the sort of landscape is for interim managers or consultants or permanent staff. Whilst I don't claim to be an expert in any of the functional areas that I recruit to, and I absolutely don't know more about being a registrar or being an interim pro-vice chancellor than the candidates themselves, I've conversed with enough of the HE community to speak some of the main language and, intuit how to match problems with problem solvers. And I've seen how market preferences can change over the years. If you take marketing as a vertical, for example, a lot of universities at the moment want very strong student recruiters with robust direct recruitment strategies. Seemingly gone, I think, are the days where narrative, PR, and brand and story-led marketeers seem to be in demand. And it's perspective like that we can help clients and candidates with. So the whole of market picture, capturing almost the zeitgeist that characterizes a particular year or era's problems, or government's problems, if you like, and providing contemporary and sort of changing solutions, whilst also being scribes or record keepers of some sort of previous strategies and solutions.
You've both given some insight about working with the client or the institution, but let's focus in a bit more on the person or the candidate. Akhil, you say on the Anderson Quigley website that you find particular satisfaction in identifying and appointing candidates with developmental potential to become the forward-thinking leaders of tomorrow. Would you say there's a right time in an academic or professional services career path for a colleague to be thinking about approaching an executive search firm? And how would they go about doing that?
I think that's a very topical question. I'll split my answer into two parts. So I'll answer it from an interim perspective and also a permanent perspective. So for perm, I'd say that candidates in exec search firm is most likely able to help those that have already achieved their first leadership position. Where we tend to be able to help people is helping them get the next position on the leadership scale. So helping a head of school progress to a dean role, or helping a pro-vice chancellor progress to a DVC role. Or, if we wanted a professional services example, staying connected with a head of finance over a journey of 4 to 5 years and helping them on their journey to become a CFO. So quite often we can't help people who want their very, very first leadership role because it would spread ourselves too thin. So with interim roles, many clients look for people who are highly experienced and they've done the job already. So there isn't always a great deal of potential for traditional upward seniority development. But I think there is a great deal of potential for career development of a permanent candidate into a mixed portfolio interim or consultancy career. So the breadth of seniority of positions you're able to achieve in the interim market depends on the highest point at which you exit the interim market. So, i.e., you'll have more interim opportunities to choose from if you leave as a permanent director rather than a permanent senior manager. Having said all of that, Susanna, a small plug. We do have a management recruitment arm, which my colleague Az Ahmed leads. We kept getting business from clients who had a very good experience with us, and they would keep asking us to work on management recruitment, and we would keep declining because it would leave us spread too thin. And after a while, we got tired of turning down business. And also, we got tired of not being able to help our favorite clients when clearly there was a need in the market. So we decided to hire my wonderful colleague Az, who specializes in the management subsector. And our hope is that if Az can work with the management level candidates, they can then be pipelined for more senior positions with Claire and I, years down the line. It's a long game, but that's ultimately what recruitment is. My advice to those who are yet to network with a search firm is quite simple. So ask people in the position you aspire to, which search firms they trust and have relationships with, and do some of your own research to identify firms who work in your desired sector or professions, and reach out to recruiters selectively. And keeping in touch, it's a two-way street. We do our best to remember you. Again, I'm going to use some rough maths to sort of make a point. When you consider that, I as an individual consultant might place 50 people a year, and then you think about all the people I talk to in the advert phase, the headhunting phase, the proactive recruitment, long-listing, shortlisting, you can very easily reach, 1,000 people in a year. So 50 people placed out of 1,000 people in a year is a 5% placement rate on average. That's obviously very skewed and a bit simplistic, but it gives you an idea that, we can't place everyone that we talk to. And if as a candidate, you keep in touch with us, stay on the forefront of our minds, and keep developing your value proposition and your experience, it heightens the chance of us being able to help.
Thinking about applying for a new role or going through the actual process can be really daunting and time consuming. And then, of course, as you've alluded to in your maths just there, Akhil, there's the possibility that someone might not be successful in getting the role. What advice would you give in that scenario to mitigate some of the frustrations of not getting the job?
This one's pretty close to my heart, especially when you think about navigating the candidate market through COVID and recent redundancies across the sector. That there's a huge investment of time and emotion when it comes to applying for permanent roles. Candidates are working full-time jobs. They're busy with personal, family, and domestic lives. But I think you can mitigate the frustrations of the perm job search through a number of ways. So I recommend compartmentalizing the job search. So consistent effort over time, focused and intentional applications rather than sort of scattergunning, and sharpening up your CV with key achievements, defining your value proposition, staying on top of CPD and following industry trends, and networking continuously, as painful as that is, virtual and online. And I would also cover all routes to market. So you've got your own network, you've got referrals through your own network, you've got publicly advertised jobs on job boards, And then you've got networking with recruiters. So as long as you're sort of putting a decent bit of effort into all 4 or 5 of those routes to market, and you're doing that over a consistent period of time, the chances of success become a lot higher. On the latter point, you can work with recruiters like Claire or I, and we can help with advice on CVs, cover letters, tailoring your application, interview prep, and some inside knowledge of the client or the sector through briefing calls with us. And as cliche as it sounds, it's worth knowing that every so-called failed interview is a learning opportunity to sharpen your next performance. We've guided thousands of people through interviews, so it's always worth asking a recruiter for advice ahead of an interview. And not many people always do. I think seeking constructive feedback is always a good idea. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. Believe me, it bothers recruiters more than anything when we can't get feedback for our candidates. And it's easier said than done, but developing a level of mental resilience, I think, is really important. And you can choose to be upset, you can choose to blame the industry or the job market, and it's rather easy to get bogged down in the sort of minutiae and cycle of recruitment and rejections. And I'm not saying any of those factors aren't true. It's really tough out there, especially in the sort of buyer's market that we're heading towards. But I'm a strong believer in persistence, continual improvement, strong relationship building. I think those 3 things applied over time should always yield success. And then I think traits-wise, be the kind of person people want to work with. Think about the colleagues who you worked with that you admire, exemplify their best behaviours. Think about the technical problems in your industry and showcase how you've dealt with those challenges.
But both of you have talked in what you've said so far about Anderson Quigley having a significant focus on interim roles as well as on permanent positions. And Claire, your LinkedIn profile says that you have a passion for providing careers advice, especially for those people who've not considered interim roles before. Can you tell us a bit more about the main reasons institutions approach you to find an interim?
Yeah, absolutely, Susanna. This is a really interesting one, I think, because institutions often seek interim leaders during periods of transition. But broadly speaking, when I look back on the types of interim roles that Akhil and I place, the reasons that institutions come to us typically fall into 3 categories. The first category is what I would call gap fill. And this occurs when a senior member of a leadership team leaves unexpectedly, and the university needs to fill that gap swiftly whilst they search for a more permanent solution. And in these cases, we usually secure the interim leader on, a 6 to 9 month contract, providing that necessary continuity. And often we will run the executive search process for the permanent appointment in parallel with this, ensuring that there's a smooth transition. The second category is what I would call capacity building. And particularly in the context of change and transformation. So sometimes an institution may lack a specific skill or the internal capacity needed to achieve a certain strategic outcome. And in such situations, hiring an interim executive with the right experience for a defined period of time can be the perfect solution. And I think there it also not only helps the institution meet its objectives, but in previous placements, I can see that it actually strengthens the overall team's capability as well. And finally, there's project-based consultancy. And this is when an institution requires a specific skill set to deliver a particular piece of work. And here it could be one person for a few days a month, or it could be a whole team of people for a set period of time. A university might need someone to come in and lead a major change program. So we would help them set it up, build it out, and implement the changes. So hiring an interim specialist allows institutions to benefit from hiring targeted expertise without making that long-term commitment. So really, our clients come to us for a variety of reasons across academic and professional services. And we're really flexible in supporting different engagement types, from fixed-term contracts to day rate options and to fixed price options.
And for someone moving into an interim role, which can be high pressure, as we heard from Andrea Bolshaw in the previous episode, What sort of support and advice do you offer interim candidates before, during, and after the assignment?
I think that moving into an interim role indeed can be high pressure, and as we heard from Andrea, there's a whole list of things that one takes on board before, during, and after their assignment. So we place a strong emphasis on that support. And I think the catch-all here is ongoing support, that's what forms part of our relationship with the client and the candidate. So before an assignment takes place, a lot of this we've mentioned, but we do help candidates with improving their CVs, their value propositions, tips for interviews, and other insider knowledge the candidate might not know about the organisation. We also offer quite a lot of social media support. LinkedIn has become a really key tool for candidates, and a strong profile can actually make all the difference. I run a number of webinars where I talk about what a good LinkedIn profile looks like, how to build it, how to use it. I also do similar webinars on value propositions in your CVs. We also help with interview preparation. I know Akhil's mentioned this, but it is really important. That can include mock interviews. It can include detailed research on the clients. But ultimately, we want to put the candidates in the best possible position to secure that interim assignment. And once the assignment is underway, our support continues. We maintain regular contact with interim candidates, offer them guidance, helping them address anything. And we act as that liaison between the candidate and the client. And if there are any issues that arise, we can be there to help resolve them promptly, providing additional support if we need it. And then after the assignment concludes, our support doesn't stop. We kind of start the whole cycle again. We conduct debrief sessions to discuss the candidate's experience, gather feedback from both the candidate and the clients. This helps in understanding what went well, what areas there might be for improvement. And it can also form the basis of a case study and a finishing reference so that we're ready for the next assignment. And then that's where we start again. We offer that advice for the next assignment, helping candidates enter back into the interim market, because that sometimes can be quite a scary place, because by the very nature of interim work, you're not guaranteed a role. You have to really work hard to get the next one. So overall, our goal is to ensure that interim candidates are not left on their own, once they get a role from us.
There's a significant amount of research and focus going on in the sector about the need to increase diversity in permanent HE leadership roles. I mean, a good example is the storytelling project led by Dr. Monica Nangia at Durham University, who'll be a guest later on in the series. It's probably fair to say there's less out there about diversity in the interim market. Akhil, what are you seeing in that market, and what reflections do you have?
It's a difficult but topical question, and one that I think deserves a podcast on its own one day. I think it's about examining from the lens of all protected characteristics, not just gender and race, as important as those two characteristics are. And diversity is always going to be harder to get in the interim market, because we're so heavily dependent on those exiting the permanent market for interims. And, by definition, an interim needs to be highly experienced, adaptable, and able to hit the ground running. So they're going to be quite often the cream of the crop of those who have achieved senior positions in the perm market, and they're going to enter the interim market towards the latter parts of their careers. So there's a level of survivor bias there already, and it's sort of correlated with, if the permanent market has diversity issues, then the interim market has them doubly so. Having said all of that, I think there are upsides to the diversity conversation in interim management. So in the older days, interim management used to be about having a so-called black book, or, a top drawer or Rolodex of interim candidates who you could keep shuffling around. I think in present day, it's much more about applying search principles and executive search principles to interim. So yes, of course, we'll have existing networks of interim candidates, but every time we get an interim search, we also do a market-wide survey and search of the market, for new candidates in the market, or to continually encourage permanent people to think about interim management as a career. But work remains to be done. The number of women in interim management has never exceeded 30%. Claire has written a blog series about exploring why this is, and we do our best to try and improve the representation of women in interim management. The most authentic example we can give any client about our D&I principles in interim is that, yes, we can commit to searching in every corner and nationwide to present you the most diverse and representative shortlist possible. I almost think that's the easy part, because we do that day in, day out, and we put a huge amount of time and effort into making sure we know every possible new interim or interim ready candidate on the block. I think the hard part is the long-term relationship building, where you're encouraging permanent talent that could provide greater representation in the interim market. So that could be women, for example, to make the jump. And those can be years-long conversations. And when the candidate makes the jump, they may be placed by another agency or snapped up directly through their own networks. And I think that's the commitment we make to the sector. That our efforts, will matter, and in the hope that increasing the overall size and diversity of the talent pool will benefit all of us, whether that's a direct or immediate gain.
Through the services and support you offer in your roles, of the type of activity that you've described to us in this episode, you're obviously in a prime position to help the sector find the best academic and professional services leaders to support development across the next few years. But being in a leadership position can have challenges, and people experience those challenges differently, albeit there can be common themes. You've recently established a programme at Anderson Quigley called Strategic Organisational Leadership Experience, or SOLE for short. Claire, can you just say a bit more about the background to setting this up and what it aims to achieve?
Yeah, sure. And actually, I'm really excited about this programme, and it's been brilliant to work with some fantastic individuals in setting it up. So the SOL programme was born basically out of a recognition that many leaders want to experience leadership outside of their own organisation. I know how I do it, but how do others do it? How can I get that insight? And throughout my career, I've seen talent from lots of different sectors, and we're all grappling with the similar issues, just for different organisations. And one day I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could get leaders from different sectors in the same room to share the challenges of today? I think they would really benefit from each other's experiences. And we also observed that while technical expertise is common, the ability to lead strategically in a complex environment sometimes requires more of a holistic view. So SOL provides this through a 4-month experience. And I think it's important to say that it's not a training program as such. We've designed it to be more of an experience, so hence the name. So each cohort is carefully curated, a group of 18 individuals, and they come together and go on a combined journey through online and face-to-face of mentoring, peer learning and practical exercises. And all of this is designed to enhance their leadership skills outside of their organisation. The agenda is co-created and it's designed to focus on the ideas and the needs of each cohort. So it will be different every time. And although we have common themes that everyone is interested to talk about, so for example, recently we've talked about building a change-ready culture and building a flexible workforce, and I can see these are common themes. Every cohort is different. So in my view, it's suitable for executive level colleagues, people who are looking to enhance or broaden their leadership experience or practice, people that want to network outside of their organisation and establish themselves as a bit more of a deep-rooted senior leader. It's also beneficial for rising academic or clinical or professional services colleagues who might be stepping into their first senior or executive level role, and anyone looking to broaden their leadership perspective as part of their own CPD. And registration is now open for our January intake, and we do have some spaces left. So if anyone's listening and wants to know more, please do reach out to me.
Finishing up our conversation today, your roles ultimately support the professional development of many people and the HE sector overall, which sounds, from what you've said, really highly rewarding. That type of work may be of interest to some of our podcast audience. Akhil, what advice would you give to someone looking to get into your field of work?
I think passion for people and the sector, excitement for matchmaking, spotting opportunities for business development, and a long-term view and partnership building, I think, is important. Also important would be being accountable, being creative, not being afraid to challenge the status quo, especially when it might result in a better appointment or a more balanced and inclusive shortlist. I think being compassionate and empathetic is important, staying resilient through market declines, and a general sort of cognizance that you're a service provider, so sometimes you have to be at the beck and call of candidates and clients. So flexibility and a customer-first approach is key. As I mentioned earlier, I think having a love for the sector is also incredibly important. There's a horrible saying of do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I wouldn't go that far, but I think it really helps when you're happy to stay on top of higher education sector intel on evenings and weekends, because it's not a chore. It's natural curiosity, and I think the ability to reflect the almost the personification of the sector you recruit to is really important, in my opinion. And most importantly, I think is you have to have the ability to understand the client's needs and help them formalize their problems into tangible briefs, and then connect talent to solve said problems. Sometimes clients don't know what they want, and candidates don't know if they're what clients are looking for. And I think a recruiter, their most valuable currency is in that consultativeness to create clarity and facilitate connections.
Yeah, absolutely agree with all of those comments, Akhil. And I think if you speak to most people in recruitment, they'll probably tell you that they fell into it at an early age. And I think a lot of our colleagues in other businesses did. But you can move into recruitment, as a second career or later in life, absolutely. And I think one piece of advice that I'd emphasise is to pick a sector that you love, because you really have to live and breathe it. Let it become your vocation, as Akhil said. And once you've identified that sector, look at the search firms that are leading the way in that space. And contact them, start building a relationship with them. You may already have a relationship with them because you might be their client or their candidate. And I think, most recruiting firms will have an internal recruitment department. We are developing a microsite specifically for people who might be interested in working with us. And it will be a great source of learning, and it will tell you more about the opportunities that AQ can offer for working in such an industry.
Claire, Akhil, thank you so much for being my guest today and for letting me shadow you.
You're welcome. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to Job Shadowing HE. The podcast was written and presented by Susanna Marsden, audio production and music by me, Rodri Marsden. More information about this podcast and previous episodes can be found at jobshadowinghe.com.